2006, a black woman, Tarana Burke, founded the Me Too movement to help black girls and women heal from sexual abuse and sexual assault. 11 years later, in 2017, Me Too, or hashtag Me Too, went viral, and it has now become the global movement. However, in light of some of the recent cases, including the R. Kelly case, questions that some are asking include, are we going too far with this? How do we navigate the line between letting someone know you are interested in them and sexual harassment? What are mothers teaching their daughters about how to deal with men, particularly with regard to how to avoid becoming victimized? These are some of the questions we will explore today in our In Conversation Sistaspace segment, where we discuss issues relevant to the lived experiences of women. Today we have Neferisha Johnson, who is an education strategist with over 20 years experience teaching elementary school through college. She is also the founder of Her Story Women's Mentoring Group and co-founder of Divine Couples. We also have Dr. Kai Issa, who is a writer and college academic coach. And I'm Dr. Heter. Let's have a conversation. All right. Okay. So I'd just like to start by saying that I think that the Me Too movement is absolutely necessary. And it's relevant. But I think when people are asking questions about how far we're going with some of this stuff. And so I guess what the first question could be, do we think we're going too far with it, or we can talk about some of the cases that we, well,
I mean, I feel like the, giving us the history of the Me Too is really important, because I didn't necessarily see it as a black woman's movement, and I think once we see it in that light, it becomes there's even more to say, Right. I think so, one of the things that concerned me in looking, and observing and being in on the conversation in social media was just like how, just kind of being uncomfortable with some of the ways which I felt like, it was being co-opted and being cast more as a white women's sort of experience rather than a black women's experiences. So hearing that it was actually a black woman who founded the movement and gave voice to it, it just puts it in another context.
Right, and I was interested to find that out too. I didn't know a black woman started, but I thought it was interesting how, I think it was an actress, what was her name, Elisa Milano, who she accused, what was his name? Harvey Weinstein, and then they started hashtagging it, and now it became, it put more power to the movement. And so it's interesting how we can this has been going on for 11 years in the black community. It's been a grassroots effort, and then once it became, once somebody else did it in another community, now it became, but regardless of however, it's relevant, and it's good that now it has gone viral, it is global, and so now we're beginning to challenge some of the things that go on in our communities, and sexual harassment, sexual abuse, and all those kinds of things that women are subjected to.
Well, I think that anything that sheds light on a way that people or community can grow is positive. I don't know that when you say too far, I don't know that the movement is going too far, because I don't think it's the movement so much as people. And you know how a story, a news, it could be CNN could have a story and they take it and it goes out and it becomes its own life. So I don't think that the movement itself has gone too far, but I do think that sometimes when we hear these stories, I question accountability, because it's still, at the end of the day, we're all accountable for ourselves. So sometimes I hear the women's stories and I still feel like they make themselves more victims than whoever supposedly victimized them. Because the way my observation is that, you can only be a victim, and this is not to take away from someone doing something to you that's unfair, but you have to kind of be a part of being the victim. Like, you have to, in some way in your mind, decide that you're a victim. So if we constantly are talking to girls about what men are doing, then at what point do we empower them? Because it is about empowerment. So you can't always be focused outside of yourself if you're being empowered. So that's my issue when I hear some of the stories. And then some of the stories you hear, you're almost like, okay, that sounded like a date gone bad. That does not sound like somebody violated you. So, again, to me, I'm always about looking at how we can be better ourselves in our own strength as opposed to pointing fingers. And that's what our culture does a lot. It's huge on finding ways to point fingers.
Mm-hmm. So I hear what you're saying on that, but I also think about, like, you can't, okay, I understand we have to talk about accountability, right? And that's one of the things I want to discuss is, like, what are we teaching women in terms of helping them to not put themselves in a situation where they can potentially become, you know, abused or in some way, or harassed, or whatever you want to call it. But we got to be real careful with, because once something happens, then it happens, and now you have to deal with that it happened. And so that's where we get into those fine kind of lines about, you know, whether you did it or who was a victim, and, you know, all these kind of things. So I think we don't like to use the victim word because we want to feel more empowered. But when somebody does something to you that's not good, and then you have to think about what that feels like. And so that's the other side of that.
You know, I think also we have to keep in mind that it is permissible worldwide for men to exploit women and to sexually exploit them, and there's a sense of entitlement worldwide. It, you know, kind of is different across cultures, but by and large, that's, you know, it's just such a pervasive part of cultures. And so with that in mind, you know, that's, you know, I think it's important for girls and women to recognize that when that is always part of the you know, that is more than likely going to be part of an experience. So, you know, and that men have been socialized to, you know, to leverage, you know, their power.
Right.
And so it's just very nuanced. Like, I think I remember when the Clarence Thomas hearings happened, and I had aunts. You know, they were for the most part, they were like, you know, they had were able to advance in their careers, and they were still, you know, they worked for, you know, the federal government, other places. They had great jobs, and they were just like totally mystified. They were like, you know, this was a part of this was what life was like for me.
Right.
And so it was really eye-opening for them, you know, to now see it on a world stage and, like, see it like, okay, this is not right, this is wrong. So
right. And it's interesting when that Clarence Thomas Anita Hill hearing, I remember thinking, oh, that's what you call it, because it had been such a part of your life.
Yeah.
That, you know, even as a child, you know, men have said things to you, and so sexual harassment was so normal. Yeah. You know, that you were like, oh, they got a name for that? Oh, okay, this is normal.
This is what it was.
This
yeah,
is what it is. Right.
To it, yeah.
Right. And so, but what has occurred, what I've been thinking about recently, is how much things have seemed to have changed in the culture with regard to what women do. Not say what they're allowed to do, because women should be able to do whatever they please without feeling like they're going to potentially get themselves in harm's way. But you still have to think about whether or not you're putting yourself in harm's way. Yeah. Because just because the culture might say that you shouldn't treat a woman a certain way, you shouldn't do this, doesn't necessarily mean that people won't do it. And so you still have to take certain necessary steps to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a predicament or a situation where you're putting yourself in harm's way. Yeah.
Well, what you said about women should, well, I'm always leery, and I know you're just talking, but always leery of any time somebody says should, because then you kind of put a category of judgment on it, but you said both sides. I mean, that's not how it works. You can't just do and behave any type of way, because, in life there's cause and effect consequences. Exactly. So you can't. Right. It's just reality. You can feel whatever way you want about it, but I think an example, and people might hear this a lot about, especially when somebody gets raped, and it's like, and they might say to her, okay, or in the past, I don't know about now, but in the past, they were like, people might say, well, what did you have on? What were you doing? And so we can talk about it. Of course, it's wrong for someone to force themselves on it. We can agree on that now. But all of us are responsible. So we have daughters, we ourselves, there's a certain things you're not going to do. And so even though I have no desire to do this, but I would not find myself downtown Atlanta, 2:00 in the morning, cleavage out, booty shorts on with heels, just walking. I wouldn't do that anyway, but I'm just saying, if I was inclined to do that and I wanted to dress that way, I would tell my daughter or whomever, I'm like, that's not what you're going to do, and you're just not going to do that. And so, and then if you did it and guys were gawking at you or guys said whatever they said to you, and then you're going to feel some type of way. That's, this, you know, and a perfect example here in Atlanta, remember Freaknik. And I was looking recently at, I guess it was kind of like a documentary they had on YouTube about it, and it was, women were being groped. I mean, you could see it on camera, they were being groped. The guys were just lewd, this, that, and the other, and it was just, it was hard to watch. But when you looked at the girls and what they were wearing, one would have to ask the question, so what did you think was going to happen when you went out with the booty shorts on and your breasts? What did you, because you can't tell me you didn't want attention. So yes, he shouldn't have grabbed your breasts, but what was your goal?
Right. Okay.
Well, yeah, and I think that I hear that, you know, I understand that, but I think that in a perfect world, women should be able to, you know, dress how they want. If they want to wear, you know, shorts out, whatever, but they should be empowered to say, we should all feel empowered to say, okay, I have this outfit on, and you can go as far as, you know, commenting and saying, hey, you know, what's up? You may not touch me. You may not, you know, do this or that. I think, you know, the more that changes, I think the better we'll be. And I think at the same time, you know, women and girls have to say, young women have to say, okay, why am I choosing to present myself in this way? And so I feel a lot of times like, you know, young women feel conflicted, you know, like on the one hand, you are wanting the male gaze, but on the other, you know, you're definitely wanting to set your own boundaries, and by all means, you don't want to be groped, you don't want to be touched and raped, you know, and so at the same time, though, you know, it's on us to teach our young men that just because a girl or has on, you know, revealing clothes or whatever, you're still to conduct yourself. You know, I tell my son all the time, you ask permission at every stage of the encounter.
Right.
You know, you know, and that's, to me, that's a way of healing and, you know, bringing about a better, you know, climate of respect, of mutual respect. Right. And so, yeah, so it's not,
So, yeah, I think it's important, too, that because context is important. So it depends on the culture and where you are. Because I think about, when I used to teach in my course, I used to teach a women's course, and how Europeans, when they encounter black women or African women, we are birth exposed, you know, and so they started calling us hot constituted, you know, black women, and so that was a way to justify, you know, sexual assault and rape and all those things. But now they had to ask the question, so then how were African men looking at it? And so obviously in that context, they were not socialized or conditioned to look at women in that way, particularly their breasts. You see what I'm saying? And so if your breasts are exposed and you're around and nobody's, there's those kinds of things aren't happening, then it says a lot about the culture and the context that you're in. And so I think some of it has to do with men being retaught and retrained about how they perceive and see women. And I think, and most importantly, that, you know, every woman is potentially your mother, your sister, your daughter, or, you know, somebody in your family. So if you see women in that way, then you won't sexualize them and then think that they are somebody you know that you can treat any kind of way or harass or things like that. And I also think it's really important how that's one thing I wanted to ask you, like, you know, what did our mothers teach us? You know, and I think that's critical, because I think some of the things I'm seeing, it looks like women, it just seems like women aren't teaching what my mother taught me, right? And then because there were so many things put in my head about men, not necessarily bad or not necessarily good, but some of them were bad, but that she didn't say it, but it was just the thing she would say. Like, for example, she would say, we couldn't take money from a man, because she would always say they would want something in return. Around all the male relatives, all men, we had to, and male relatives, we had to always have on a bathrobe. We couldn't expose certain, you know, our weight size in certain ways. And so, and we definitely could not be hanging on a man. And so, like, sometimes I see little girls, and I'm like, see them kind of, you know, hanging on men and their families, and they're just around them, and just, and I'm like, that would have been completely prohibited in our family, because I think she knew something that a lot of young women may not know, is that you have to be really careful with some of that, because you potentially in harm's way.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So that's the question to me. Like, what are our mothers teaching us? Are they teaching us and you know, a mother's teacher is one thing, but the cultural teachers is something else. And so then now we conflicted because, you know, you go out with this perspective and then you get in the culture is saying, you know, because the culture sells our bodies with everything. And so you know, what messages did you get from your mother in terms of how to present yourself, how to deal with men, you know, and this should we be teaching our daughters those same things, or should we shift the messages?
Well, I think people do. You teach, you are what you were exposed to. I just saw examples, and I think about moms and aunts, and I didn't get a lot of, you know, men this, men. I wasn't really taught to be afraid of men, but I could watch how they were, and nobody was, you know, trying to put their breast in anybody's face, or and in family gatherings, you know, usually the men would be in one area doing what they did and the women would be in. But I was never directly told not to do this or that. So I never was afraid of men. And I liked men and I loved men, and I appreciated men. To this day, I appreciate male relationships. So I was never taught to be afraid of them, and I never really had a lot of you know, negative experiences, but I think I just watched, and so some stuff I could just look and see, and I'm like, oh, okay, you don't do that, or, you know, men, and I saw how men responded to women. Like, I could tell when men were attracted to women, and so I think I just paid attention to the people around me and saw kind of by example. So yeah, I was never taught to be afraid of them, though.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't say it was so much fear. It's just, I think it really has to do with understanding the nature, you know, because there's nature and nurture, right? And so what is it that the female brings out? What does a female potentially just bring out of a male? What kind of energy do you bring out of him, particularly if he finds you attractive or appealing? So then that's the nature. But then there's the nurture. So how are men nurtured to deal with women regardless of what they naturally feel or see? And so it's those kinds of, you know, nuances. So I don't think she necessarily told me to be afraid. I think it was more just being careful, you know. And so, and then whatever she said, it proved to be true. So if you have grown men, like one time I remember, nobody's ever touched me, but one time a guy, you know, a male relative of the family, you know, just reached over and asked me to kiss him on the cheek, and I was like, because we were by ourselves. But see, I was one of those people who would go and tell everything, so nobody really.
Good for you.
Yeah, right. I was big mouth. Yeah. Right. I was. Let's say about anyway. And so, you know, that's what I'm saying. So that's why I get a little offended when I, you know, something funny happens when I see a young girl. Yeah. Or even not any guy, just kind of up. And it's interesting how those gender dynamics. Those gender dynamics, because I see boys do it. I don't do the same thing. Yeah. But boys are molested too.
Yes, they are.
Right, and people don't know, like the majority of sexual assaults occur in the family. Right, and so.
Or somebody you know.
But the majority of them are family members. Right, and so, so that's kind of very interesting. You know, it's just this gender stuff is very, 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 very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I had my mom passed away when I was a teenager, so I didn't really get a chance to really ask her, but I feel, you know, memories of her and looking back on, you know, some of the conversations and behaviors, you know, and then talking to therapist friends of mine now, you know, I really feel that she had unresolved sexual trauma herself, and so she imparted a very much a message of, you know, wariness, but also that, you know, you're somehow at fault if you experience this kind of, you know, if you experience a sexual assault, and so I think she had a shame, you know, just looking back on, you know, how much she would, you know, just in terms of our interactions, I think she had you know, some body shame of her own that she sort of transferred. I think she did her best. I mean, she was just kind of, you know, acting, you know, out of her own experience and trying to do the best to, you know, protect me and give me all the tools I needed to be strong. There's always this inherent, like, message with a lot of Black mothers to their daughters, be strong. You know, there's a overriding message of strength, and you have to push past anything. And so she was not. We were at in the 70s and 80s. There wasn't a lot of, therapy services available, and we didn't have access to that. So she sort of processed it in her own way. And one memory that really stands out is when I was about 11 or 12. We had our own separate phone lines, my brother and I, and then she did. And one time, so for for a couple of weeks at night, I would get, this guy would call. It was obviously a man, and he would say all kind of things. I didn't recognize the voice. I was like, how did he get how did he get the number? It used to terrify me, the kind of things he would say. And I would be able to go back to sleep. And I don't know why, but I didn't tell my mother. But one time, or I might have mentioned it, but one time she was actually there. And when the guy called, and she picked up the phone, heard what he was saying, and just cursed him out. And he never called again, but in that interaction, she was like, okay, so how did he get your number? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, I have no idea. I mean, I didn't give any grown man my number, but, she didn't, I kind of wish she had not led with that, or I felt like she did. I mean, I felt good that she defended me and just drove the man away. But, in asking that question, I was like, I felt an immediate sense of shame and second guessing myself, like, well, maybe I did somehow give someone mine. And I think that's what a lot of women do to, their daughters and other women, young girls close to them without even really recognizing it, is, that sort of second guessing, sort of questioning. And what it does in the person who hears it, I think a lot of times is it sort of sparks shame in the person, and not, because whenever you second guess yourself, you kind of go through, there's a process and an inner process that you go through that's very destructive. It's subtle, might not last a long time, but over and over, I think a lot of girls, young women and women, experience these sorts of daily assaults. Like, what did I do? Why should we even ask ourselves that? Every time you ask yourself that question, what do I do? And it's coming from a place of something that someone did to you. That kind of erodes. Right. I feel, in my opinion, it kind of erodes your sense of self, your sense of security, and your love of self, really. Yeah. So, and that's what happens so much, that we're not even aware of it.
Yeah, and I think that's what the culture used to do. I mean, right now we need it. People have been in this struggle for years. Mm-hmm. So with the social media now bringing it to light with this hashtag and all that, and it's taking it to another level. But this has been a struggle since we've been on American soil, and then for women. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, with the women's movement and the feminist movement. Yeah. And now we're in 2017. We now it's taken off in terms of some of these things. But I think that's how it used to be approached. Like, what did you do? Mm-hmm. And I remember having a similar experience with a male in our family, that somebody that I really looked up to, and he was an elder, and I was so glad, because I had heard all these messages from my mother. Mm-hmm. I've had a couple of sisters in my family that got raped by uncles, right? And this, I guess they didn't come mess with me because they knew I was going to go tell it because I was a big mouth. Mm-hmm. Which I think that's one of the things you want to tell your children too. They let them know that they can come and talk to you, about things like that.
So were you aware of it as it was?
I didn't know until we became adults.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I forgot where I was going with that. But I remember one of the family members that I thought was, a really decent guy, and I forgave him and everything. But we were doing something. He wrote me a note and said, "I want to F and suck you," and I was like, "What?" Right? And then I went to my mother, and I told her, and she was like, "I told you." You ain't supposed to be hanging around a man like that anyway, because he was mentoring me and told me what to do stuff. And so he seemed non-threatening. And so it was interesting to me how she responded to that, But I know she went and told him off too. But the thing about it was that it was like you said, you become the person that you put yourself in to do that.
Right.
And I'm 14 years old. Mm-hmm. So by 14, I'm very, very conscious of these. But the thing is, it's not even just my mother. It's what I see in the culture. I mean, even as an adult woman, and you know, if you read and you see all the things, most of the crimes that are committed in the culture are by men, and most of the most heinous crimes are committed. You know, so I'm not saying that. You know, I'm not trying to say anything negative about men, but that you have to understand their strength and understand that they potentially can be dangerous depending on the situation. So you just have to. I'm just saying you have to pay attention to those kinds of things.
Well, I think like what you said, I think the problem is when it's blame. You know how you're saying blame.
Right.
It's one thing to say I'm responsible, I'm conscious, and then blame. Blame is never good. Like you shouldn't blame yourself. Like if you end up, I shouldn't say, "Oh, I'm horrible," because you shouldn't do that, or it's not best to do that. And then your parent blaming you. There's a difference to me between blame and, okay, you come and tell me your situation. Okay, let's talk. And you tell me and I listen. And then I let you share what you have to share. And I might ask you, what do you think happened? And then I might give you and say, well, you know, how could we have done that differently? Or was there anything we could have done so you wouldn't be there? But I think it's always not, it's not healthy to blame either yourself, somebody else. So I think that there needs to be some differentiation between blame and then, you know, my responsibility, my, you know, what I can do. Because there's always something we could do. Like to me, and just in my life, if I get in a situation and I'm like, you know, that either I didn't like it or it didn't feel right, and I might ask myself, well, what could I have done? Or what did maybe I do to end up there? It's not blame. I'm not horrible. I'm not bad. It's just, you know, if I don't want to go that route again, I think about it. So I think it has to come away from blame. And I think people don't necessarily know the difference between, you know, if I say, well, what did you do? That right there sounds like blame. But if I, you know, listen and, you know, attempt to understand, but, you know, they just doing what they were taught.
Yeah,
basically. People do the best they can with what they have. So we have to look at our understanding. They operated from where they were. And so we have to kind of empathize with that.
Right, and that for me, I felt, I loved it. I mean, I think that the messages you taught me were good because I thought, you know, it's turned out to be true to my experiences, you know, so. But I wanted to move in and kind of talk a little bit about, I know, you know, the R. Kelly thing has gotten, you know, way out of control and everything, but I did get a chance to see some of the interviews from the women, and I thought it was just interesting to me on that was how, I hear what you're saying in terms of women sometimes seeming like they're helpless. Like I had no choice but to do this, or I was in this situation, and so some questions, you know, that came out of those for me for those interviews was like, well, you know, what is your mother teaching you, or what are your parents teaching you that you would feel like you would have to put yourself in a position where because a man has power and money that you would allow yourself to be, you know, controlled or abused because you want to be with somebody like that, or because they have power and money. And so those are the kind of things that kind of stood out to me. And then the other question was, where were the parents? You know, how do you? I think, you know, based on my upbringing, how do you, if any of that stuff is true, because you know, it's he said. I mean, I don't know what's real and what's not real, but how do you put a teenage daughter in the care of a group of men?
Yeah.
You know, so what are you missing about, you know, in your understanding that you would actually allow your daughter to be away from you, a teenage daughter to be away from you with a group of guys?
Yeah.
You know?
It's definitely, it's definitely a form of, you know, child abuse. And so, you know, but the fact, I feel like if R. Kelly had been sexually abusing, imprisoning, raping, mind controlling white girls, this would have been over, you know, it would have been over a whole lot sooner. Instead, you know, there have been rumors, there have been intimations, some, you know, the testimony of that young girl who charged him with sexual abuse and battery many years ago, that was played over and over again, made a joke of. It's clear to me if those were white girls, if those were white women, it wouldn't have taken that turn. It would have been condemned. He would have been jailed. He would have been found guilty. But because black women and black girls are not presumed to be innocent, they're presumed to be
The
sexual
stereotypes.
deviants
Right.
who are, deserving and somehow attracting of abuse, that, people, people kind of turn a blind eye. And we owe these girls and these women an apology. I feel that way. I feel like, wow, I sort of, I felt like I feel like I could have done more, on their behalf, and just seeing the scale of it, hearing about these girls who have been so, we know from the psychology of mind control and brainwashing, there's stages, there's grooming stage and all of that, and we know that, R. Kelly, he was a predator, and he had really perfected it, and so, he has shared himself that, maybe some of his behavior came out of being a sexual, victim of sexual assault. But, the fact that it could have, that it went on so long, and just, hearing these stories, it makes me sad, and that, I feel somewhat personally sorry.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I haven't followed it enough to know, all that. I just saw some of the more recent interviews, and I guess the thoughts for me, so I hear what you're saying, but my thoughts still are, because I don't know at 21, if he's in his 20s, in their teens, I don't know how much mind control somebody, because the way I see it from somebody, people in their 20s, and a lot of people are just really nuts, where we are developmentally. So I don't know how much mind control a 21 or a 22 or 25-year-old could have over somebody else. I really don't know, because you're still dealing with people who are young and probably making some bad decisions and bad choices. So, so I don't know, that was earlier on. Now we're talking about where we are now. Okay. So, anyway. Yeah.
So I think too, though, I always have issue with us, with people, us, community, getting up in arms about something because it's put in the media. Because I mean, R. Kelly, like we said, we've been hearing about it. All of a sudden, it's on Lifetime now, and we want to act enraged. And I'm also always concerned when we make it about a person. I mean, if we're going to talk about pedophilia, let's talk about pedophilia. If we're going to talk about celebrity worship, let's talk about let's put in a larger context, because this is not about R. Kelly. But to me, the people who put it out, it was about R. Kelly. It was about bringing him that the media wanted to, for whatever reason, we have no idea. They wanted to sling him in some mud and make him look like whatever he was. Yeah, and I'm not saying, I don't like him, I don't know him, but I see it for what it is, and it's not really about. It comes under the guise of, those poor girls and pedophilia. But, I mean, if we're going to have a conversation, this has been going on. It's gone on with different artists from different backgrounds. It goes on with the priest. So we're going to talk about it. Let's talk about it. But let's stop acting like we're so concerned as a nation about these children, and we don't do anything but sit around and talk about stuff we see on TV after it was on Lifetime. So that's why I just am at, like, okay, I'm over it.
That was my issue with it, too, like, because there's certain things that go on in the industry, period. So the things that they're saying he was doing, I've been hearing about these things been going on for I think the thing that separates him out is the children, the young girls. So I don't really know what's real and what's not real about that, because like I said, I haven't been following it. But I do know about the industry, right? And I know that what they're saying he was doing, so why would we pick one person out of the industry and demonize him when that's across the board what's going on in the industry?
Right. So let's talk about that.
Well, it definitely is. But here's an example of he is a very extreme example.
Okay.
And it seems to me like his behavior probably progressed. And they say like, sociopaths and people like that, they, the more they get away with it, the more sophisticated, they become in their, techniques of control, abuse, and so they escalate. They don't de-escalate. So that's the way I kind of understand it from a psychological standpoint. But he represents. I hear what you're saying in terms of like the media attention, but he represents a lot in our culture, and in terms of just the music and all of that. Like I get mad because the only way I feel like I credit that song, I Believe I Can Fly, with like finishing my dissertation, because that was part of my ritual. You know, the last few months when I was trying to just finish it all up, I would always listen to that song. I'd listen to it when I was on the subway, and it would just, you know, I felt like it helped me a lot. And so I hate that now. I wish that were not the case.
What exactly is it that you hate?
I hate that I would use a song, and I think it was around the same time that he was being accused of abusing this woman. And I feel complicit. I could have found another song. I mean, there were
I feel like to me it's the same with Bill Cosby.
Right.
Whatever he felt for me at that time, I'm not going to change those feelings because he was doing whatever he was doing that wasn't cool. Because there's so many versions of us. So yes, he might have been doing that to the women, but if I enjoyed the Cosby Show, I'm not going to stop enjoying the Cosby Show because now he's been convicted. And the same with R. Kelly. I liked his music. It's true that if I hear it now, it might trigger it, but I'm not going to be like, oh my God, I'm gonna hate that song now because of what he did. I'm not doing that because it's art and I appreciate it.
Right, he did the song when he was a kid, right? Wasn't he like in his 20s? Was he like a kid?
I don't know what else,
I feel like I don't know the exact timing, but I'm pretty sure because it was mid 90s, and it was like 96 or something. I was finishing up my dissertation, and I'm pretty sure those hearings had just happened.
So you're going to feel bad about liking the song back then. That makes no sense.
Well, see,
you just want to feel bad.
Are complex.
No, right? Because I feel like I should have, I should have.
Shoulda, coulda, woulda. What that don't make sense.
Well, no, I'm just. I mean, I don't think
that makes sense. I'm sorry, Kai. I don't make sense.
Well, I feel like it does because I mean, when
you mad at yourself for liking a song from the '90s,
but
or you regret it. But I mean, it's past. Let it go. Okay,
let it go. Let her have her feelings.
But I mean,
let her feel what she feels.
What I feel.
It's not helping her.
Well, no, I think
she's just expressing what she was going.
What it does is it's helped me to in the future if something like that happened. If I had. I would take a second look. I'd be like, why am I singing this song? Why am I using this? Whatever. Because
it's good songs.
Yeah.
Right. That's what happens. Like even like when I was teaching.
Because
why are you making yourself wrong? That's what I'm asking.
Oh yeah, no, I was wrong. I should have picked another song. I should have said my dissertation was on Black women's narrative. I should have said like what? How? Well, I don't. Yeah, it was a lesson to me. It was a life lesson.
Yeah.
I just don't.
Right.
I don't.
The lesson is what? What's the lesson?
I do not.
Well, here's what I think.
Black popular music,
right?
Without, I'm more
without
thoughtful.
Researching the artist.
No, I mean not researching, but just being more thoughtful.
Well, I think that speaks to like in this culture, what we do is we put artists on a pedestal, right? And they're just people. I mean, like in this culture, we treat people as if they're gods. Really, they become like the contemporary gods. You see what I'm saying? And so now, because they're doing good music, you expect them to be a good human being. But
do we really? Do we care about what they're doing outside? I mean, are we really looking at it? Because we don't know them.
Right, exactly.
We don't know them, but once we do, and once it's such heinous kind of information, I feel like we are obligated as intelligent, consumers of culture to be like, no. This is not representative of our values, our beliefs. This perpetuates systems of abuse, oppression, and power. Yes, we have to do it. We're not perfect, but we have to do our part,
Right. I hear you on that because if people are doing things that are, awful, and then we're buying their music, it's like you're supporting, but basically you're not holding them accountable.
Yeah, like Michael Jackson. Like I'm trying to figure out, like to what extent I pretty much feel like I should, I don't want to.
See, and that's my problem because something that someone else has shared with us about what we really don't know about. Now we're gonna totally change the whole feelings, memories, connections we have with these artists because of something that someone else told us that we don't know.
No, that's real. That's true. That's the other thing.
We're pretty sure it happened.
We're not. No, I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't care. I'm not watching it. That's He Said, She Said. I'm not watching it.
And then the media, one of the things I know about the people come out and say it, that's one thing. But I know the media completely distorts stuff. I mean, when Trump says fake news, some of it really truly is fake news. I mean, so... And like you said, we really don't know what's real and what's not real. Now it seems like some of it's true unless you see it for yourself. Yeah. It seems like I said, they're being accused. We don't really know if it's real.
Yeah. If you weren't there, you can go with what you believe. You can say, I'm looking at this and I believe it and I believe it to be true. Okay, but I'm not going to let somebody else tell me their stories. somebody's not even here. If I'm even going to judge, somebody's not even here to defend themselves. So it's not even a fair story. I'm not giving my attention to that. I'm not going to change my views on an artist because someone says they had this relationship. And then the little I've heard about this Michael Jackson story, I'm like, that person don't even sound credible from what has even been out. He said it, he didn't say it. You're not getting my attention. And I think the media does. We allow ourselves to be these puppets that every time they come out with something, we run over here and we do this, and we run over here and we think this, and you get to decide how you're going to feel about anything.
Well, no, and that's what I'm doing. I'm deciding. I mean, I personally have made a political, personal commitment to be more conscious consumer of our culture. And so many years ago, I didn't know about Michael Jackson and his...
and you still don't?
Well, no, I do. I feel like I have... What we can do, we have some information, and that information and stories have persisted over time, and I feel like people have put them aside. I know... what really kind of sealed it for me is I'll never forget watching, I guess, that Grammy Awards thing. Remember Emmanuel, the actor Emmanuel, what's his name? The little guy, short guy.
I remember him, yeah.
I will never forget when when Michael Jackson, he went to the podium to get his award or whatever, and he had, like, Emmanuel on his, on his hip, was, kind of carrying him on his hip. And I remember thinking then, that's kind of strange. And then maybe a couple days later realizing that he wasn't a little kid. He was like 14 or 15 at the time. This wasn't a...
So you're assuming, but so if Michael's story is I'm innocent and I'm just like kids, could that possibly be true? That's my thing. Could his story be true? Could his version of the story, I wanted to be with children, could that be true? That's why I say you don't know.
Well,
so could it be true?
So what we know about, I would say the best case scenario is he had very poor boundaries. Okay.
Right.
And so he had poor boundaries in picking up, like carrying around a 15-year-old boy.
Okay.
And sleeping. It's pretty,
right.
he let male children. And,
okay.
And here are the facts. It was never girls. It was boys.
Okay.
Okay, so all of these.
So if he thinks of himself as an 11-year-old boy and we're having a sleepover, I'm just saying I don't know what happened, but I'm just saying, could it be true?
So what we know with boundaries, so if it's not apparent in the perpetrator, that they're, not exercising good, healthy boundaries, it is in the one who's receiving it. Mm-hmm. We know that, what it does for, folks who are, who are victims of that they start to feel funny. They know something is wrong about it.
Right.
It's like the vocabulary is very, similar, and folks who have
I see what you're saying. So you
experienced
can see the
that.
patterns, right?
So there, and so it fits what we know of as like very, very textbook sorts of patterns of people who've been victimized sexually, and also of perpetrator behavior.
Right.
So yes, he did harm. I would say at the very, very least, he harmed many male children's sense of healthy sexual boundaries, which we know has lasting harm. And so that's what these boys are saying. That's the best case scenario, but I don't believe that. I believe he did more. I believe he touched them inappropriately. I believe the stories. I believe victim stories, because if you amass every story of assault and abuse, by and large, if you did the numbers, overwhelming majority are telling the truth.
Okay.
So why wouldn't
So everybody that comes forward at that point, because if you think we don't ever know why people do anything. So let's say I want to get attention or whatever, and I know most people are going to believe, and I'm who knows, and I could come out for whatever reason. I have no idea why people do what they do. So to me, and I heard when they did the whole Jussie, and people were saying, well, I heard a woman say, I feel you should believe the victim all the time. And I'm like, nope. And when I heard the story, I was just like, something didn't sound right about it to me. I just was using my spidey sense. I was like, something don't sound right to me. And so I don't believe that just because they're victims and everybody that comes out, that they may not have some ulterior motive. I have no idea. I'm not going to try to analyze it. So I don't believe that.
Well, see,
Right.
that's the
thing.
That's the thing. You can have an ulterior motive. You can want media attention, everything. You can
Right,
be a victim.
exactly. Right.
So those are not mutually exclusive, but because by and large, people who come forward and what we know about how hard it is for people to even come forward. Think about the years of self-doubt and shame that most victims experience before they feel, empowered to tell their story to someone. So by and large, it's most victim stories are true.
So
I feel like,
Yeah.
as a thinking person, it would be somewhat illogical. And just
to me,
to
that's
have
a
believed
judgment
them.
right there to say something's illogical because
Right.
you just don't know. You
Well,
just
no, what
don't
I
So what she's
know,
saying based
I'm
on-
operating on the knowledge that
based
most
on the
victim
research,
stories
right, yeah.
are
And
true.
okay,
Right.
that may
And
have
so-
been the
yeah,
past.
so
I
I'm
don't
gonna
know.
believe it.
Right.
I
I
always
believe
admit
it.
that I
Right.
just don't know.
Right,
That's
and so the thing is, I think what we have to do is put it in context because we
Yeah.
deal with famous people versus people who aren't famous. Most victim stories was probably true. I don't know what if anybody did the research in terms of famous people being victimized and people come out, because we know people do come out for ulterior motives because they want a lawsuit. So we know a lot of that. A lot of that can happen when we talk about people who are, have high profiles.
Mm-hmm.
And so, so I think that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with because if somebody who's not famous, if those stories come out, will be believed to be true. You see what I'm saying? So this makes this stuff kind of sensitive
Right.
because there's always potentially people who are famous and who are powerful, who have money, and people are going to come out
There
and
might
say
be a
things.
motive,
There might be
right?
a
But if
motive.
it's just Johnny down the street, you
Right.
have to ask yourself, well, why would?
Right.
Yeah,
Right,
that makes
right.
sense.
But I still could go back to the accountability because now it's about people, you being accountable yourself from the standpoint of we wanting to be associated with people with power and money and the things that we let go on. And so back to the parents, allowing their children because they're famous because if I think about the kids with Michael Jackson, like, why would you even let your child
Yeah, I
be
feel that
alone
way
with
too.
anybody? I don't care who they are.
Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? So, and because you were drawn to the money and the power as a parent, then you now allowed your child to be put in a situation that put them in harm's way, and so now you got to deal with the consequences of that. And so now the child has potentially been harmed. Now you've been harmed because your child, if all that's even true. You see what I'm saying? So these are the complicated things I think, particularly with regard to celebrities.
Yeah.
Even the young women, because some of these girls, I think one of them said she was 17 or whatever, and some parents can't stop their kids from doing whatever they want to do.
Right.
They
At
got-
17, no.
Yeah, you can't stop them. And so
Yeah,
then what's in your head? What were you taught in terms of how you value yourself, regardless of who being associated with somebody with power and money? I mean, power and money. So my thing would be, how do you value yourself? So are you going to allow somebody to? Women do it all the time. It happens every day in this culture.
Yeah.
Women marry for money, and so then now you put yourself in situations where you're being abused or neglected, or and women will say, "I turn a blind eye because I'm getting, he brings in money." So it's basically how we prostitute ourselves.
Yeah.
Mothers prostituting their daughters, really, or parents prostituting their kids because they want to be associated with money and power. So again, it goes back to not to say take away from if somebody victimized somebody and they should be held accountable, but we also have to look at how you put yourself, how you value yourself and your children, that you would put them potentially in harm's way because somebody has money and power. So that's the other thing, so I think we really have to be very careful.
Yeah.
What we, the culture teaches us that, and then what we allow to happen because the culture teaches us that. So, yeah, alrighty. Any other? I think that I would like to continue this conversation, but the next conversation I would like to really deal with sexual abuse, sexual. I do, one more question I wanted to ask you.
Okay.
Right, but the next one I wanted to deal with sexual abuse because you really do need to. I would feel like we do need to give people tips about how to deal with that, what to do, and where they can get help and stuff like that. I didn't want to focus on that so much on this one, but I also want to deal with sexual harassment. Right, it's like when does it become harassment? Because back to the situation if a guy comes onto you or a girl, because the culture religion. So if a guy comes onto you or a girl comes onto you, when does it become sexual harassment? And when is it? How do you navigate the line between, okay, I like you, I'm attracted to you, but then, you know, when does it become harassment? You know, so that was another.
If you don't like them, basically. I mean, if it's somebody, and then I mean, obviously in the workplace, there's just certain conversations you don't have in the workplace. I mean, no one needs to be talking about, you know, anything below the. You know, you start talking about anything in this region at work, that's just not appropriate.
Right.
But if you agree to go out on a date, and you know, if, let's say you meet somebody at work, and you all decide to go out on a date, and then I think sometimes what happens, you hear stories like maybe something went wrong, maybe they broke up. But I mean, I've had situations at work where a male will say something, and I remember one in particular. He was a I guess at the school we had these kind of hall monitor people that, you know, made sure the students stayed where they were supposed to stay. And he, you know, and I was conscious of this outfit I had on, and I was trying to cover up and make sure that, you know, I wasn't busting out. And so I think I had my jacket on, and then I was really hot, so I took my jacket off. And so he made a comment, something like, oh yeah, something about my rear. You know, he made a comment. And so I quickly said, I was like, I said, you better keep it professional. And so, he came back like the next day, and he was like, I am so sorry, please. I was thinking about it all night. I was like, she's gonna be mad at me, blah, blah, blah. I was like, we fine. I mean, I said what I had to say. You got it, and we good. And he said, but he was really worried about that. Right. But when I said keep it professional, and I looked at him like, you better keep it professional, that was it. Now, if I had been like, you know, and whatever, then that would have given him permission. So it again, it came from me. I kind of navigated that.
Right. But, you know, sometimes, because I think sexual harassment does become, it's really, in terms of law, it has to do with the workplace and professional environments. But I'm sure most of us have gone through that, you know, with somebody saying things that you feel are inappropriate. And sometimes you just smile because you don't really know what to say. So then if you smile, then they think it's okay. Right? So then you know, so then how do you navigate that? One of the things that, what I would do, I've had pretty good success, is that you just, I can see the twinkle in a guy's eye when they're talking to you, and then they have that twinkle. I don't know, some people are not. Right, and so what I do is don't give it any energy. Just no energy. I just I don't even see it, right? And so I think that's kind of kept me kind of safe, because I'm like always been tunnel vision anyway in terms of task oriented. But some people are more friendly, and they smile more. And one thing I've heard guys say, if a woman's nice to me and friendly, she likes me. They just automatically assume if you're friendly and nice to them, not saying all guys, some men that I've known, she likes me. Right? And so that's what makes some of this stuff, I think, a little challenging. You have anything?
Well, how old were you when you got to that point where you could, like, sort of not give energy when they would?
I think probably because I don't have any energy anyway. Probably because I don't have any, you know, very little sexual energy. Maybe because I don't see myself as a, you know, some people see themselves as, you know, sexy.
But you are.
Right, but I never saw myself as sexy anyway, so guys told me I didn't believe them, right? And so...
so it was easy not to give it energy.
Like, I ain't got time for this, right? So, but I remember being that when I had my first academic job at UMass Boston, I would see this guy in the workplace. And every time he would see me, he had that glimmer in his eye, right? Yeah. And I would just, how you doing? Keep moving. Just walk right by, act like I didn't see it. You know, everybody have to do that too. I was just act like I didn't see it, and then it would just fade away. And so I really never had any real problems there. I had a colleague one time that would have sexual things and sexual overtones, and it was uncomfortable. You know, it's uncomfortable. So then it's like, what do you say to still be? You don't want them to feel like you're being mean. You know, but at the same time, you're trying to keep it friendly. But I think what she said, you know, you're just like, look, I'm not doing that. You know, maybe sometimes just being real straight with them, and it just throws them off guard. So that, you know, could be a way. So don't play into it, or just be straight if it keeps.
Well, I mean, if somebody, like, he directly said something about you had, I mean, if I didn't address it, then next time it would have been something else. So it's different, like, if you see a twinkle, because then you could decide what to do. But if somebody specifically says, yo, your butt was looking good, you gotta.
But first of all, that's offensive.
Yeah, you gotta hit it on there and be like, we're not doing this, and then you know, go from there. So
yeah. But I mean, like, even if you hadn't said something, like, it wouldn't have been your fault if you had to come back the next day and been like, said something else or escalated.
Well, it definitely wouldn't have been my fault. But if he had continued, because he would have probably said something, he would have probably taken it a little further. That's just what men do. And then depending on how I responded, that would have decided, well, maybe let me go here. I mean, that's just how it is. That's how people are. That's how men are. They're gonna whatever you kind of let them do, they're gonna come follow you. So if you make it clear, then they're like, oh, I can't play these games. Yeah. So. I know that if I had laughed it off or he would have done something else and just kept going to see how far he could go.
So you think it's better not to laugh it off or just let him be straight?
I think it depends on the person and all. I think everything's different, but I'm just saying I know in that situation that he would have just kept going.
Yeah. I think it becomes a real problem for men if or not just a man, a woman or a man is in a position of power. Mm-hmm. That's when it becomes really shaky because you have to be real careful about that because now you're in a position of power. Yeah. And if you're saying something, but what happens when you're not? Because see, you're not like even in the artistic arena. I mean, arts and that industry. I remember I have a girlfriend that used to be a groupie, right? And so I would go with her sometimes. She was a groupie to athletes and entertainers. So I would go with her sometimes, and I was really shocked by how many women be standing outside these guys' doors, lines of them. And the guys would come out in the hall, come out the room, go into the line, and just pick one. And they go follow them in the room and stuff like that. So they would have, and so they would just have, so guys, and I don't think women are aware, but maybe they are, that a lot of men, athletes and entertainers, most men who are doing anything got groupies, right? And athletes and entertainers, a lot of them have a female in every city that they're in, right? And a lot of us are not really... But privy to that kind of information unless you're hanging out with them and you hang with men and men tell you there's stuff that's going on with them. But anyway, I forgot where I was going with this. I was really talking about, I went down that road, but I was going down another road about harassment. If you're in a position of power, then you have to really, I would say if a person is in a position of power, you really should not probably try to have any kind of relationships outside the workplace with people. But that's my question. What happens when they start coming on to you? Right? And then now you got to do it when that happens with people in a position of power.
Oh, you mean the employee starts?
Yeah,
the subordinate comes on?
Yeah, and that happens quite often.
Oh, yeah, it does.
Right, and so then now they have to tread that. Sometimes people might think they like each other. There's an attraction. And almost all these situations, I've probably seen or been in. There's an attraction, and then now you realize, we don't want to do this, but now there's a struggle. Yeah,
well, I think personally, I feel like safety is a key concept. So, like, if you don't feel personally safe with someone's overtures or comments, and by safe, I don't mean like, oh, I'm not, I'm just, in the sense of, oh, I'm going to be harmed, but just you're unsettled. Your heartbeat might be accelerating. You're starting to feel nervous, then that can rise to the level of harassment, not in the legal workplace context because it's more about power and authority, but and so I think it's incumbent upon men to say this kind of conversation I just don't. Maybe they don't want to say I'm not feeling safe, but just there's something about it. I'm feeling, I'm uncomfortable. So we have to create space for our young boys and our young men to say, to be able to articulate that, and for women to be able to hear that, accept it, and respect it. So safety is a major part.
Okay.
And like I feel like it takes women a long time to have an awareness of their sense of safety. And so, and a lot of it, I attribute personally in my life to, I had ambiguous, I had role models who had their own conflicts and trauma, so they didn't impart that to me. The need to feel safe and be safe and to stand up, for yourself in that way. And so, so I think we don't realize that till we're late, till we're older. So we can, so when someone does, make an overture that's not welcome or say something inappropriate, maybe we're more empowered, to navigate that.
Okay.
but it's trial and error. It's
Mhm.
from many years of living.
Yeah, that's
you know,
right,
like I
exactly
can't
what it is,
imagine, you know, young girls who are, you know, following a celebrity or something like that. I'm not saying, you know, I think they're still developing their sense of boundaries and safety, and not enough people are saying to them, you know, do you feel safe? What are, you know, what are your motivations? What are you hoping to get out of this?
Right.
And men are not asking enough questions. More celebrity men are, though, saying, you know, when they're interacting with someone, like, is this okay? Is that okay?
Right.
I'm going to touch you here. Is that okay?
Exactly.
That's what should happen.
Ex-
Really, I feel like
Right.
that's what needs to happen.
Right.
And so
Smart.
people
Mhm.
get to know one another.
Right.
But when people don't know each other, yes, both, you know, parties should say, you know, is this okay? Is that okay?
Right.
And when you get to know, you know, then you kind of know each other's, you know.
Exactly.
So.
Right. All right. Well, this ends our segment today on Sistaspace. Thank you both for coming out and having this conversation.
That's cool.
Thank you for inviting
me.
Okay. And until our next conversation, continue to grow in love, light, and consciousness.